Ken Mencl joining us from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. The sergeant joins us most Thursday mornings and talks a little law enforcement. It is 58 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you too. And of course, if you've got a question or comment about law enforcement issues today, feel free to give us a call at 208 736 0300. We were just talking off air. We've got a school that started today here in the county.
Yeah, Castle Forge School started up today, and I've got an SRO out there that's going to be there with the kids today, doing a little traffic enforcement to start the day off with, and then spend some time with the kids there in the school and just kind of get things started off with the school year. Just a couple of things to remind people, especially being over on the west end of the county, those big yellow buses are out again today.
Yeah.
They'll be back out again this afternoon, taking kids home. So just make sure that you're watching those stop arms and they're required to activate their lights 200 feet before coming to a stop. And once they're stopped, those yellow lights transition to red. So just make sure that we're not passing school bus stop arms. That is a misdemeanor citation, something you don't want to get. And just pay attention. It's all about the kids and their safety from the time they get up in the morning to the time they return home again. As a community, let's do our part to make sure that those kids get to and from school safely.
I was just going to point out that last spring I was out. I think it was last spring. I happened to be out by the Clover School, and there was of course they have a smaller bus because it's a smaller private school. But I saw a bus parked by the school, and I had been over at the church, and I actually walked over and asked the bus driver. I said, "Is it okay if I pull out and go by?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, I'm not. We're not at the moment picking up anybody or dropping
Right.
them off. But I wanted to make sure that I knew because I was so close by. I didn't want to go out and turn on the street either way if they were going to be picking up kids or dropping them off.
And I think that's one of the big things that we see. There's just a lot of confusion as to when you need to legally stop for a bus, when it's okay to go around a bus. And I guess it's never okay to go around a bus, but when you're coming head on from a bus, how many lanes there needs to be before you can actually continue past the bus? And that's three or more lanes. So if you're on a two-lane road and that bus is stopped with the yellow or red lights flashing, you've got to stop.
Hey, I got a quick question, and we'll just throw this one in here, and then I don't want to because I spent the last hour on this subject. But a writer asks if someone is flying a flag in distress and they're not in distress, is there anything illegal about that?
It, illegal? Well, could it be charged? Well, there's several rules. I think there's 13 rules about how to properly fly or display a flag. When you're flying a flag upside down, the only time that it should be flown upside down is when you're in an extreme emergency or distress. Beyond that, the flag should always be flown right side up.
Right. Not necessarily. You're not necessarily going to get a ticket though for doing it.
No,
Yeah.
it's more of an etiquette thing.
Yeah.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find law enforcement going out and I mean, how far do you take it? Do you invite? It can be seen as freedom of speech, flying your flag upside down if that's what you choose to do. There certainly is flag code. I think you get into some very touchy territory though if you start citing people for how they choose to treat the flag.
Now we should point out too that you're somewhat of a regular listener of this program. So you were listening last week when state police were here,
Yeah.
and there were some things that came up that you wanted to follow up on too as well.
Yeah, they were talking about making traffic stops and writing tickets and whatnot. And I think the best rule of thumb that the deputies that I work with go by is we look at the totality of the circumstances. We look at um, how egregious the violation is that we observed. Did somebody just barely run through a stop sign, or did they pass through the stop sign at a high rate of speed? Was the speed 5 miles an hour over the speed limit compared to 15, 20, 25 miles an hour over the speed limit? And then once we make that traffic stop and we grab somebody's driver's license and we go back to the car and we check to make sure that they have insurance and their registration is current, we look at their driving history. Has that person had a lot of incidents where they've had contact with law enforcement based on their driving? Uh, if somebody's 10, 15 miles an hour over the speed limit and I pull up their driving record and I see that they've got 15 prior citations in the last 5 years, obviously a warning in that situation is not going to change driving
Right.
behavior. And that's what it's all about, is encouraging people to change their driving habits when we see a violation so that everybody can safely motor in our community and that we can get safely to and from the destinations that we choose to travel. And that's really what traffic stops are all about, is changing that behavior. And that can be done either by a warning or it's done by enforcement and a citation being issued.
Of course, we should point out too, the citations mean something to people in Idaho, but from travelers from California, that's it. That's all you're going to find me. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
we're limited really to three types of citations for somebody based on speed. Um, 1 to 15 miles an hour over the speed limit is a $90 citation. 16 and above is a $155 citation. And we have to really prove some things beyond speed. It's not speed alone to go into reckless driving. Speed coupled with maybe passing over a double yellow line or passing 4 or 5 groups of cars on a highway, a two-lane highway. There's just several more factors to get to reckless driving to be able to cite that than just speed alone in and of itself.
we've got more coming up with Sergeant Ken Mencl from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. Also, he's got some thoughts too. He's going to mention the passing of a local law enforcement legend. That's on the way. It is 59. It's 8:40. Bill Colley too on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Sergeant Ken Mencl with us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 8:42 and we're at 58. Bill Colley as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX. If you got a comment or question for the sergeant this morning, 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. Because of the uniqueness of working in law enforcement, it's unlike most other professions people have in the country when it comes to a bond you develop with various people. And then every once in a while, you lose somebody who's had just an exemplary career, and you always like to remember them when that happens.
Absolutely, and this one for me hits really close to home because yesterday I found out early in the morning that Don Thewison had passed away, and Don had been in the hospital for a little while. He'd actually contracted the COVID virus. Known Don all my life. He happens to be my uncle. Um, and so I didn't mean to get teary-eyed here this morning, but Don spent his life in public service, and he worked for the Buell Police Department for a lot of years and worked with the Twin Falls Police Department for several years. He retired there as a sergeant. And for as long as I've been in law enforcement, which has been 20 years, he's been the investigator for the prosecutor's office for Grant Lobes. And, Don just really was a true public service. He embodied what it meant to be a true public servant. And in the number of times that I spent in the courthouse and uh, in the court building to see Don and how he interacted with victims of domestic violence and how he interacted with people and just how he interacted with me. To be able to sit in his office at times when I was looking for advice or counsel or wisdom, and the numerous people that I've talked to over the last 2 days since I found out about Don's passing, like Chief Dan Hall over in Jerome, and just what an impact he made on all of our lives. And I guess the greatest compliment that I could give to Don is just the spirit that he had about him and how he was able to calm people and help people through, and just the wisdom that he had and the advice that he had to give to people. And I'll really miss that about him. And his funeral's coming up next week. I'm sure if you pay attention to the newspaper, you'll be able to find out the information on when that funeral will be next week. But again, we lost a really good person yesterday. Law enforcement here in our area won't be the same with his passing.
We have gotten to the point though where I think it's a bit easier to get people together for a funeral than it was a couple of months ago. When we had the I think was it the trooper or the deputy was killed in Elko County
Right.
a few months ago, and because of the virus, they had a parade of vehicles that went by and people saluting from alongside the road, but it limited the number of people who could actually attend a funeral.
It sure did. In fact, I got a chance to speak with the family at one of our events in downtown Twin. It was actually a Back to Blue night, and some of his family members were actually there, and they've since moved to Twin Falls County, and they talked about how grateful they were for the support from the sheriff's office, as we mentioned the passing of their father on our social media page. And that was about all they were able to do, was to have that escorting their father's body back from Las Vegas. And with the lightening of the restrictions with COVID-19, yeah, we don't have those same types of issues that we have to face today like we did a few months ago.
So people can pay their
So
respects.
people can pay their respects, and it would be appropriate to um, stand on the side of the road with a flag if you so desire. to back the balloon. Don Thewison truly was a blue soul. His heart was soul were in law enforcement, and he did a phenomenal job at serving his community.
We have a caller with us. And caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX with Sergeant Ken Mencl.
I have a thought to honor the policemen. I have a friend, Pat Pigeon, that was an officer of Plain County for many years, just passed away. But if there could be a building with their names in there, a plaque, and this way some of the police officer relatives could go in there and pay respect and communicate with other relatives of police officers that passed away.
Yeah, that's a great thought.
Yeah, because we do this already for people who are killed in the line of duty.
Yep.
But if we could have an honor roll as well, for that way people could walk in there and they could reconnect, families could reconnect, and just that long list of all of those people who've done this work.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, that's a great thought.
I have a message from Coach Pete Colson, and says, my prayers go out to Don's family. And he said, may God bless and keep you all in his perfect peace. And of course, when Coach was working here in Twin Falls County, he worked pretty closely with law enforcement in a great many areas too.
Yeah. And I'm just reminded of all the years I've been in law enforcement. The Thewison family has a storied tradition in law enforcement. Both of Don's sons were law enforcement officers. In fact, Terry Thewison is a lieutenant with the Twin Falls Police Department still. I've known Terry for, again, all my life, but between Terry and Don, those are two individuals that were largely instrumental in my decision to become a police officer. I remember watching Don go to work in his uniform or come home on a few occasions when my family would come over to visit their family. And shortly after I graduated from college, or I was shortly to graduate from college, I happened to be up visiting grandparents. And one night, Terry Thewison was on duty, and he stopped by my grandparents' house. And I remember looking outside and seeing this patrol car and just kind of bewilderment and amazement that I had a cousin that was actually in law enforcement. And he asked if I wanted to go on a ride along with him. And that was the biggest mistake of my life because that treble hook sunk so deep in my jaw, and I got bit by the blue bug, and here I am 20 years later.
Yeah. we wanted to point out you do a lot of work also on the water during the course of the summer, and it has been an eventful summer as far
Boy.
as that goes. I would imagine you haven't had to rescue anybody from the falls in the last few days.
In the last few days, yeah, let's quantify that days. Weeks, unfortunately, that's not the same
It has
story.
been just an incredible, and you've mentioned this before. We have so many more people now who see that the river is just a great place to go recreate in the summer. But word got out, and it got out really fast, and it just changed everything out there in the matter of the last few years.
Well, and so Centennial Park was on the top 5 list of places to go to kayak and run out with your stand-up paddleboard, and if you're adventurous enough to go beyond the Pillar Falls and go all the way up to Shoshone Falls, which that's where we've seen so many people this year make the mistake of porting around Pillar Falls and going up to Shoshone. And most of them have been from out of the area, not familiar with how the wind, especially if you're on a stand-up paddleboard, makes it difficult to get back to where you started. And then if you get too close to the current, with Shoshone Falls just coming over, if you get within 50 to 75 feet of those falls, it's going to just bring you right back in and underneath. And people we see so many tourism pages that highlight what Idaho has to offer, explore outdoor Idaho and whatnot, but they don't talk about the dangers of some of these areas. We've made contact this year with several thousand people out on the water. We've written more than 150 citations to individuals out on the water who simply just don't have a life jacket with them, haven't brought one at all. But we found another area that's largely popular and becoming more popular, and it's in that top 5 area of best places to kayak in Idaho. And that's on the Snake River down at Thousand Springs between Banberries and Blue Heart, where you've got that really crystal blue water you can see to the bottom. And we're seeing lots of people divert from Centennial Park down to Banberries and Thousand Springs area, Ritter Island. And it's just blowing up. We're finding as many people in that area as what we've been seeing at Centennial Park. And there's other areas that we're seeing just as many people go to that you haven't traditionally seen non-motorized vessels. We're seeing a lot of them over at Shoshone Falls, up at Twin Falls Falls, and I've even heard, I haven't been down there very often to know, but we're seeing a lot of people taking their kayaks and stand-up paddle boards down to Roseworth and Salmon Dam. So it's continuing to explode. It's a fairly cheap sport to get into. Unfortunately, people get into this sport and buy a kayak or stand-up paddleboard, and they don't take the time to realize that there's rules that govern that as well. There's a certain way to paddle up river, just like rules of the road. There's rules down on the waterway, and when you're paddling on the water, you stay to the right. When you get up to your destination, you're going back to where you started from, you stay on the right as well. Leave that center channel for the power boats so that when you have a power boater that comes up through the middle of that channel, they can't get anywhere because you've got kayaks dotting the waterway from shoreline to shoreline. It makes for some heated tempers, which we've seen this summer. And like you said, it's been busy. We've had a boat catch on fire down at Centennial Park and just absolutely ruined the dock system down there and caused several thousands of dollars worth of damage. And that was probably something that could have been avoided. Some of the safety equipment on that boat had been removed that could have possibly prevented that fire from happening. And then just the number of rescues and assists that we've had all year long in helping people out of situations that they shouldn't have been in to start with.
And everybody who's out there boating, there's some things you should have or you've got to have. A fire extinguisher, for
Yeah,
instance. That's the most basic thing I think you can have. And the second part of that is, too, we've talked about this before. If you're coming in here from somewhere else, you're going to have somebody look over that boat.
yeah, absolutely. You're going to have somebody look at your boat the moment you come into Idaho at the invasive species check stations. But then once you get on the water, you run a pretty good chance, especially here in Twin Falls County, where we have a full-time marine team of being contacted by law enforcement. And I think one of the biggest excuses that we saw when it came to people not having a life jacket on their kayak or their canoe, or not having the invasive species sticker on their kayak, or not having a sound producing device. The biggest response we had is, well, I didn't know. And we've done everything that I think we can possibly think of as far as education, at putting information out on social media, here on your radio program, on other forms of media, as well as just educating, being out on the water. And I guess the best response I had with some of these individuals who said I didn't know is, my family and I like to go out of state to numerous places. Lake Powell is one of those areas, down by Zion's Park, and there's a lot of rules that govern Lake Powell. And I know that before I put my boat on Lake Powell, unless I want to be contacted by law enforcement because I did something wrong, I should know the rules. It's really easy to hop onto Google, right, and say, what are the laws and rules governing a Lake Powell, and what do you need to have when you get on any body of water in the state of Utah? We frequently talk about know before you go. And so whether you're going to Redfish or Pettit Lake, Lake Cascade or Bear Lake, which is unique because you have to follow the rules in both Utah and Idaho because Bear Lake encompasses two states. Really do your homework. Get on the internet and research that before you go somewhere and go boating, because there are laws that are different depending on the water and the state that you go to.
And one other last thing. We're going to be moving out of the, well, tell you what I'll do. I'll squeeze a caller in because I like to give preference to a handful of those. And one of the things you like to do is speak to them too as well.
Absolutely.
Caller, you're up next. You're on the air at 8:54 with Sergeant Ken Mencl from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office.
Good morning, Sergeant, and good morning, Bill. Thanks for what you guys do. I'm not a go on the water person, but I keep hearing about the invasive species sticker, and I'm just curious. If you can order this sticker online and you put the sticker on your boat, what does this sticker designed to do other than just generate revenue? Like I said, I'm not a boater. I don't get in the water because I'm not a great swimmer, so I don't need somebody to come rescue me. But I'm just curious what this invasive species sticker, the entire purpose of it is. And I'll get off here, but thanks for taking the call.
Hey, that's a great question. So the sticker is a $7 sticker, and it's something that you need to, well, by state law, you have to renew every year. And that's for any inflatable that's 10 feet or longer, any stand-up paddleboard that's 10 feet or longer, kayak, canoe, anything hard shell has, no matter the length, has to have one. And then when you purchase your boat registration on a motorized vessel, part of the cost also covers the invasive species sticker for your boat, so you don't have a separate sticker on your motorized boat. So Idaho is one of the last states in our area to not have the quagga mussel in its waters, as well as several other identified noxious weeds. If you go down to Lake Havasu or Lake Powell, you have to have your boat washed once you pull out to make sure that you get that ever invasive quagga mussel off of your boat. And it likes to go in places like your outdrive. If you have a jet boat, up into your intakes. Um, really loves outboard motors, and it can stick to anything. It can stick to your stand-up paddleboard, your kayak, your canoe. And so if you notice anywhere you come into the state of Idaho, such as if you're traveling northbound on 93 and you come up out of Jackpot at milepost 3, there's an invasive species checkpoint, and all watercraft must stop. Even if you have a inflatable stand-up paddleboard that's tucked away in some piece of, the back of your truck or wherever it happens to be, if you have that, you're required to stop. It's a significant fine if you don't. The invasive species, and then there's another one when you come up out of Utah at the rest area just out of Malta. But we have checkpoints throughout the entire state of Idaho, and the funds generated from the invasive species sticker goes to manage those checkpoints so that we can do our very absolute best in inspecting all of the watercraft that come into the state of Idaho from outside, making sure that they're not infested with that quagga mussel as well as other noxious weeds and other critters, so that we can keep our waterways clean and don't have to worry about what some of these other states are fighting.
We got about a minute left. We should point out you'll be back next week. And
Yep.
one thing that we didn't get to today, but I want to talk about, because we're going to be getting into hunting seasons. And again, that's etiquette when you're out there and there's fences and other areas and
Trespassing issues.
yeah.
Well, and again, we see a lot of people go out in the South Hills and other areas throughout Twin Falls County where they hunt on four-wheelers and in their trucks and whatnot. And we find as the weather's starting to change, overdue hunters and things of that nature, leaving a plan in place so that we know where to start looking for you if you don't return on time, and the trespassing issues. That's a whole show in and of itself that would be a great topic to pick up on next week.
We've got more coming up with Ken Mencl then in 7 days. In the meantime, we've got a break for news at 9 o'clock and Pastors Roundtable on the way in just a couple of minutes. Bill Colley, too, on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com.